Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Barb Nangle, the community manager of Known, and I want to welcome you to today's edition of Known Live. And I'm really excited to have Elke Sudin of Drawing Booth with us. She's our guest today, and she's not only going to be talking about Drawing Booth and who they are and what they do, but she's also going to be talking about how to be a not starving artist. So, Elke, I'm going to take a moment to talk about some things we have upcoming on Known Live, and then we'll have you introduce yourself and we'll launch right in. So, I want to let you know of some upcoming events we have on Known Live. This Friday, the 17th at 11 o'clock, we have our Pivot Talk show. It's called Change from the Bottom Up. And this week's episode is how the nonprofit Connecticut Diaper Bank pivoted both their distribution and their donor engagement. So if you're involved in a nonprofit and you want to learn some tips and tricks about how to change up your donor engagement, you might want to watch that. Next Tuesday, the 21st at 8:30 on Digital Media Sync is the third in a series of 3 on virtual events. And actually, Elke's going to be talking about virtual events today too. And this coming week's episode features a checklist for virtual event promotion. So be sure to check that out with Julia. And then next week on this same show, on Thursday the 23rd at 3, we're going to feature Marina Marmolejo. She's the founder of Dream Kit. What that is an app that connects homeless youth with virtual resources, and they can receive rewards for their growth and share their progress with the community. So be sure to check us out. You can watch all of our events either on Facebook Live, or you can also watch on the Known website, which is knowncoworking.com. And I would like to now ask, oops, hold on, I just pushed the wrong button there. I would like to ask Elke to introduce herself. So take it away, Elke.
Well, thank you, Barb, so much for having me here. So I'm an artist. I studied illustration at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. I'm still Brooklyn-based, so I'm hiding out right now for a couple months. And what I've done with my career has gone from illustration to fine art, and then sort of back to illustration, and then translating everything that I learned through, organizing myself as an artist and organizing other artists, and applying new business skills and kind of getting back to the art that I really love, which is quick drawing, especially portraits. And I started the company Drawing Booth to bring that to corporate events, an environment that could really use some more creativity. And we, in the past 6 years, we've grown from a small New York-based team to being across the US and in the UK as well. We also do more than just portraits. We offer a bunch of other live virtual digital art experiences. So these are all things that there's a live element, there's an artistic element, and it gives some sort of like alternative to a traditional photo booth or something else that you might have at an event. So this has been a really good opportunity, not just for the art that I really love, but expanding and incorporating different creative fields in our offerings.
Wonderful. So I just made the connection between photo booth and drawing booth. I hadn't made that connection before, even though I've been all over your website and we talked and everything like that. So that makes a lot more sense to me. And so you're obviously quite the entrepreneur. Have you always had this entrepreneurial spirit? And is this the first venture that you have that you've ever created?
So that's a great question. I consider myself a serial entrepreneur. So, one thing after another. I mean, you really, especially as an artist and as an entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable taking risks. You have to be comfortable failing. Sometimes it just requires patience. And like it took a while before I knew about the events industry, which is actually the industry that we get hired in, and which is a lot of my advice for young artists is that there are those who understand what you do, and there are those who don't understand what you do, but they need your services. So, the organizational skills that you learn when you're running a website. I used to have an organization for young artists, and we used to publish blog articles. So I used to be press, and I used to get written about for my own work. So it helps learn what's going on, like who are all these different roles, and how do they play out. With my company now, we outsource our bookkeeping, but I did the books. So when our bookkeeper, needs to do something, I know what that means. So it's like about wearing all those different hats, especially as a creative person with a lot of interests. There's so much that you can kind of pick up on, and instead of like reading about or getting a business degree, if you're someone who likes action, then just do, and you can figure it out as you go along.
So how about if we take a little bit of time to talk about Drawing Booth, and maybe you can show some images about the things that you do so people can get a better understanding of that. And then after we do that, I'd like to talk more about this notion of not being a starving artist, and how you, I'm going to call it bucked the system, because it seems to me that most creative people that I know just sort of buy into the idea that if you're going to be a creator, that you're going to be a starving artist. And I just think that's BS. And so we'll talk about that. But let's talk about Drawing Booth first. So what would you like us to know?
Well, we specialize in portraits. There's something really timeless and amazing and sort of magical about the portrait experience. What event planners like about what we provide is that it's not just like, oh, you get your like caricature. First of all, we upgrade everything from the style of the drawing, the style of the artist and their presentation, the attention to detail, the technology. We've been drawing on iPads all this time before the iPad Pro came out. So all the technology is just kind of caught up with us. And then especially working virtually, translating those things that we do. We're doing a lot more graphic recording now. We provide not only this takeaway that's kind of fun, but it's a unique experience. Like you might not get a chance to be one-on-one with a professional artist like that. And then because our artists will typically mingle in event crowds, you can really get a sense of their working technique. They're, engaging with people. It's so much more of an interaction and unique experience and surprise in that way. We also have our artists wear mobile printers. So there's this surprise element where people don't even realize they get a little printout right there. And it's just like, we just like upgrading everything.
How big is this printer that they're carrying over here?
It produces little 4x6 prints, and we have like a little holster.
Nice.
Yeah, our artists are very talented, and they work very quickly and are managing printing. So, they just hide all the skill that's there.
Right. Yeah. I think that is really fantastic, because clearly you've learned if I can print it for you on the spot, it's going to be much more appealing to the customer. And that's the kind of thing, like I would never have thought mobile printer, like that was even an option. And that's one of the things I love about like people who are entrepreneurs, are like, we have this problem and we're going to figure out a way to solve it. And somebody already did. So that's so do you want me to share the screen and show some of this, the deck that you have lined up there? Is this the time or?
Sure. So right now we're doing a ton with virtual events, and this is our deck that we're updating. You can see in this slide my like what it looks like when I'm sketching at an event. And so, everyone's doing like we're doing right now, all these Zooms and all these everything, conferencing, trying to translate an in-person experience. And, it's such a challenge for event planners. And so what we do is we translate some of the things that we've done before, and then also introducing other elements. So like graphic recording, this is something where you have a presentation going on, and this provides a creative element, an illustrated element, to help make that session more interesting. And then the company, or or whoever's hosting the event, they get this fun takeaway to post, especially when we have it all animated out. And it just adds so much to their event.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something that you create ahead of time or while the event is going on?
While the event's going on, so you would have the speaker, this or panel going, and then during that time, the artist is sort of like working through the page and adding more to it.
I didn't realize it was happening in the moment. I assumed that it was something that was done beforehand. That is even better.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's really something we recommend for every event, because you want some notes, you want something to look at while you're in the session. So we try to make that really accessible.
Right. And it's so much better than a bulleted list or an outline. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm much more likely to, it's so much more engaging. And there's so many different kinds of learners out there. And like, I don't know the statistics, but I know that the majority of people are visual learners. So this just makes so much sense.
Yeah. So we're still like, this is, still part of how we're translating something that's popular in person and how you can get it virtually. We're also trying to provide a lot more like team building and ways of people to engage with each other, because there's a lot of like happy hour kinds of events. So we're seeing the needs of our industry and then coming up with solutions for them.
Smart. Oh, virtual paint night.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is also a combination of which is appealing for events right now, where they could get a box of supplies and then work with something that's tangible through this virtual experience. So kind of like a virtual yoga session or something like that. But they get the paint. The instructor is leading the group through step by step how to do, a painting. And they get all the supplies sent to them. So it's a nice little kit.
So we got a comment from Rick. He says, I love this stuff.
It's great.
Yeah. It's also exciting and inviting to look at. I'm thinking, I'm like, what can I do? What's a virtual event I can do that I can feature you guys at? So speaking of that, can you give us an idea of maybe like the last, 3, 4, 5 events, like the types of events? What kinds of organizations have you worked with?
We work with tech companies, financial institutions. Like everyone has their corporate meetings. We mostly do corporate events. We do get hired for weddings, bar mitzvahs, things like that. But I really like the corporate events world. I think that it's like they need our creativity, and like in nonprofits and everything too. But yeah, they just and through this format too, we're venturing into doing more with animation. It's nice to be able to highlight some of these other things that we do, at this time.
Yeah, no, this is a really cool idea. Like, I still want to push the button and play those videos. It's so inviting. I don't always want to do that on an actual video of humans. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So can you actually play that right now? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so this kind of combines some of the like portrait elements and just some of like the Giphy kinds of things that we can do. And it's like everyone's doing a virtual event. Everyone needs a piece of marketing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, this is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you play the other one too?
Sure. So this one we collaborated with some other animators on.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I have a friend who lives in Menlo Park. Wow. That was fantastic. So there's a much wider range of things that you do than I realized when we first talked. Okay, do you want to say more about that? Actually, the live broadcasting.
I mean, this is part of basically what we're doing to inform our client base of what they're dealing with. You know, like when they're working with us, we kind of like, look, there are two ways this can happen. One is sort of broadcasting, kind of like what we're doing now, where, you know, people can tune in. And the other is video conferencing, where you might want something like team building, you know, where it's more interactive, you know, breakout sessions, and giving our client base a way of understanding how we fit into their needs and their formats.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're providing some other content like how to work with creative vendors for your virtual event. You know, like what are questions you should be asking, and like basically a lot of tools for people to use our services. And that's something I recommend for everyone. Like, you know, you're trying to work with people who don't understand what you do and put it like in a context that's going to make sense from their perspective.
Right. Wonderful. Anything else you want to share with us about Drawing Booth before we get on to talking about your personal experience as an artist?
Um, we're always looking for artists.
Oh, no kidding.
Always looking for talented people who are nice to work with.
Okay.
And you know, like being an entrepreneur, the fun thing for me, you know, I approach business as an artist. So I will do things just because they seem like fun. Instead of how much money will this make me? Like, that's not my goal here. You know, I want to make sure that like creatives can get paid. Cool. You know, that's something that I would want if someone, you know, wanted my skills. But you know, I just welcome anyone to come to me with like, hey, I do a little web design, but you know, specifically this, or like with this animation of our logo, you know, someone who's like, I can do, you know, animation and maybe understanding this versus that, and just making cool things with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were referred to us by Raheem Nelson, who was our guest a few weeks ago. I don't remember the number of weeks ago. I'm kind of guessing that maybe you went to school together. Is that how you guys know each other?
Actually, he applied as a portrait artist for Drawing Booth years ago, and we we decided it wasn't the right fit for like our specific needs for our events, but we just became friends as like
Yeah.
I've had art buddies,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and that's so valuable, you know, because it like it's a hard world out there, and there are a lot of like nasty people, you know. It's you know, it's sorry, I'm sorry to say, and honestly that's something I've had to really learn in business, and I'm still bad at. Like, I'm still bad at like turning people away, because I always want to give someone a chance. Like that's what I always wanted, you know. You give me a chance and I can like do something, but you have to protect yourself. So at least lawyers exist, but you don't want to get to that, and a lot of it has to do with like recruiting and just working with good people, and then you work with them for years because it's such a valuable relationship.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the co-working environment in which you know, we're known live sprang from, and we're actually still tied to the known co-working space. But the point of co-working in general is not just about sharing resources like we're sharing a building and business services, but it's really more about collaboration and
Mm-hmm.
building relationship. And I call it like cross pollination across different industries. And so, like, the way that I found you was from Raheem, and the way that I found Raheem was from Christina Kane, who I met from the Grove, which is how I got to know in the first place. So it's like this chain of people knowing each other. I'm gonna unshare that so that you and I can be on the screen here. And so I think that's a good transition into talking more about some of the things that I know some of the folks in the audience want to hear about, which is how to be a not starving artist and some of your philosophy, and then some of the things we were talking about before we came on screen. I'd love to to dive into some of that. So take it
Sure.
away.
Yeah. There are different types of people out there. And honestly, after a lot of my worldly experience, and maybe it's just still my personality type that I'm like going down the route that that I'm in, but a lot of fine art painters will have a day job or something that pays the bills and then have a nice studio. A lot of illustrators will say, I want to pay my bills with my skills. It's sort of like a stance to take. So you kind of have to figure out where you fit in. I think for like, I have a kid now, and I would tell him like, make money something else and then do really experimental, like pushing boundaries stuff, because there's that side of me that wants the beautiful studio, but it can also be a trap, that you can have paying the bills work that doesn't allow for anything else. Or even with illustration or commercial artwork, or for my business, there are times where I'm doing HR and I'm like, that's not what I wanted to do. But then there are other times that we're doing a project for like a big name company, or we're being flown out somewhere for a luxury event, and I'm like, this is why I stick it out through all the paperwork and all the other not fun stuff.
Yeah. So we have a comment I want to share. So it's We Are Creative. So this is the branding and marketing company that actually Known uses, and I personally use for my own coaching and consulting business, because I watched him in action, and I was like, this is the guy I need. And by the way, he has a free webinar tonight on branding. Anyway, he says, Elke, enjoy hearing your philosophies with helping creatives. Would love to have Drawing Booth help us with our clients in being even more creative. So I will absolutely make the connection between the two of you as soon as we get off of this show. So that's that's the ideal kind of situation that we want to see from this show. The point of this show is to, I think of it as weaving communities together. So we're always, of course, looking to grow the known community, and we want to help folks like yourself grow your community. So we're exposing you to our community, and we want you to expose us to your community and all that. So that's sort of how the co-working world works. So I got a little distracted by the comment there. So what I also wanted to say was I read the book Big Magic by Elizabeth. Oh my goodness, what is her last name? Is escaping me. Gilbert, Elizabeth Gilbert. She's most famous for having written Eat, Pray, Love. I don't know if you've ever read Big Magic, but it's really about being a creator, and it's a fantastic book. I loved it. I took notes that I carried around in a little notebook with me for quite some time to remind myself, like, there's many ways to be a creator, and I am a creative person. I do it mostly in the world of crafts, but I'm also creative with my life. And the big message from her was, I'm a writer. So what I do is write. And I didn't ever put the weight of supporting myself on my writing, because I'm going to write no matter what. And so it didn't matter if if I waitressed or I worked in retail or whatever. I did whatever I had to do. And I just write, because the way to become a better writer is to actually write. And she gave an example of a friend of hers who decided as a very young man, if I can't support myself with my writing, I'm not going to write at all. And that seems like a crime to me. And this also reminds me, I have this young friend, her handle on Instagram is Meggie the Singer. She's 18 years old. She just graduated from high school. She's been writing and playing songs for 6 years.
Mhm.
And she put this message up the other day about how her whole life until she just graduated and went into quarantine, she's had to shove her songwriting in little bits and pieces, like 15, 20, 30-minute increments of her life. And that now that she has the time, it's really different. And she's, still sometimes does that. And we got into this conversation about how there are some people that believe if I can't have this gigantic chunk of time during which to create, then I'm not going to create at all, as if I can only create under the ideal circumstances, or I'm not going to create at all. And that just feels like, like it just thinking about that is so painful for me. So I guess what I'm talking about is like this mentality that we have can be so confining to us. And it seems to me that you have a much more like wide open mentality about art and creation and how to not be a starving artist. So I guess I'll stop talking for now and let you comment in whatever way you want to comment.
Yeah, no, you got me thinking. Like I did a demo for a client yesterday. We were like a recorded demo, so we could see what the interaction looks like. And I told them like I actually haven't drawn a portrait in like a very long time. I'm also a new mom, so I'm really appreciating the virtual space because I am most like I'm not as able to travel around doing live events. And as an artist, let's say what I like about portraits is that it's always challenging. Like you're never going to be, there's no end to it, but it's enough satisfaction that you're like, well, I did this and I like was able to get here, but it'll continually be interesting. But even though I didn't do it for a long time, like, I still had that in my back pocket. Like that skill didn't disappear. And so I think when you have some of those skills that you can also get bored by those skills, like, oh, I explored this, but I don't have any pressure to push myself in that direction. Yeah, I mean, there are so many restrictions to our time, to everything. I mean, I also was pushed into quick drawing because I don't have time to do a 40-hour painting. After doing years of, let's say, quick portraits, I did an oil painted portrait commission, and I clocked myself, which I never do, and including glazing layers took me 10 hours. Which is nothing. Like it was just 2 sessions of like really a couple of hours, and I banged it out because in the meantime I've been drawing a lot of digital quick portraits, so I could get facial features down fast. So it's nice to have sometimes a project that pulls together all the 15 minutes that have been building up over time.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And then one of the things that you mentioned earlier that stuck out for me was that artists, I don't know if you said exactly like this, but what I got from it was they have to learn how to fail. And I think that that's what maturity is in anything in life, is that when you can learn how to fail well. And when I say fail well, what I mean by that is recover quickly from failure, that you don't let it take you down. That you just go, hey, oops, I tripped. I don't stay on the floor. I get back up and I walk again. And I think that in the world of entrepreneurship, that ability to fail and pick yourself right back up again is such an important skill. And so that's a really translatable skill between artists and entrepreneurs. And this idea of being a not starving artist to me means you can't just be an artist, that you have to also think like an entrepreneur. And that reminds me of a comment that you made before we got on the live broadcast about hanging out with people who aren't just artists. So you want to say more about that?
Sure. When I was in art school, I was also near a law school. So even though I actually have like a few different lawyers and they do different things and then they become my friends, or they were my friend before they were my lawyer. I don't know. But like having an appreciation for other people's careers and what they're passionate about. I think that's why I like, in general, like I like people because I see that people have so much to offer and I want to bring that out. And then other people help bring out their aspects in me. When you hang out with people who, like, basically my advice is that everybody needs marketing. And every creative field can be, exploring a topic that has to do with something extremely personal. Like the best art is when it's extremely personal. And then on the commercial side, it's bringing out what's kind of personal to a company or a brand, or giving voice to something for someone else. I think that's why I'm an illustrator. I like doing that for other people. So maybe that's why, I haven't drawn in, a portrait in forever. But when someone else needs it, I'm like, oh, yes, like I want to translate all that joy into it. Yeah. When you hang out with people who are just in different professions, they're the ones who are like, oh, I need a postcard or a video. I don't know what I need. And you can be the one to provide it.
Right. Yeah. So any more thoughts about how to be a not starving artist? I mean, it seems to me that being able to pivot in whether it means your medium or your audience or whatever seems to be vital to that. Is there more?
I think that, like I was saying, in our conversation, building an amazing portfolio, especially when it's for real companies, because we might do an art school isn't what real companies who are like, well, I'll pay you $100, which like isn't what you were taught in art school that you should be doing. But then you'll get a lot better doing those things. And then real samples, they solve real issues. Networking. I mean, just like my first exhibitions as a fine artist, I had people writing press releases for me and all these other things that I didn't know how they worked at the time. But I was just doing a ton of networking. Like it was when social media just started getting used for business. And some of those people, it's really great to see where they've gone since then.
So you had a couple of other other pieces of advice for success. So in addition to having a badass portfolio, you talked about industry organizations, like being active in them. So can you give some examples of industry organizations that you found beneficial?
Sure. So coming out of art school, we're kind of taught like, oh, there are guilds for designers and things like that. And I personally haven't had a lot of experience in those fields. I mean, like maybe as an illustrator, I feel connected to the Society of Illustrators, but because I've had success with my business that's in the live events industry, so I became active with organizations like ILEA or MPI. I mean, MPI does like corporate meetings. Like for the corporate meetings world, it's like hotels that book rooms. It's not necessarily the most exciting creative stuff, but then there's a whole community and they have florists and they have caterers, and then we fall into entertainment. And then we can provide entertainment for their, networking events and things like that. And then, someone's looking for an idea, they have us in mind. So understanding that every industry, like, I've heard this example once of like water, bottled water, they have their own conferences. Like everyone has their own conferences for their industry. And if you're giving something to that industry, like providing a product or some way of helping them, then, you may be creative, but like you're catering to the whole world that has its own associations.
So that's brilliant. That is not what I thought that you were going to say when you said associate. I assumed you meant like the guilds and that sort of thing. So that's really, I love that piece of advice. And then you specifically mentioned don't just hang out with other artists, which you've touched on a little bit. But do you want to say anything more about that before we wrap up?
I mean, even my inner friend circle, I'm like, that one's a chef, that one's a writer, or one of my friends runs like a literary series, and her take on, in her own field, like just being an expert in her field, or musicians, it teaches me, like, I can translate that into visual art. Like I went to art school, like I know what I'm talking about for my own industry. And so there's this sort of professional side of like people who can hire you. I mean, I end up doing a lot with musicians like album art or things like that. You know, even better is when you can do like for someone's business that has more money. But even socially, you know, you're just exposing yourself to diverse audiences, diverse networks.
Right. I think this is a question that I want to ask you, and then feel free to, answer and then talk about anything else that you want to. But how do you usually get your clients?
So we're actually 65%, something like that, come from good SEO, which,
nice.
I do a lot of trade shows. We're in the US, we're in the UK. We're involved with these different networking groups, and that's a lot of effort. And our SEO has come out of just like this is also like good advice for creative, young creatives. Do one thing really well. When I started out, I was like, well, I could do this and I could do that because, I have skills. But if you're translating a creative offering into a business, businesses need like an expert of something. So that's why people will create separate businesses to be the expert of this and as a different brand, the expert of that. For like bookkeeping and organizational purposes, it's complicated to have so many different passions, and you kind of have to pick and choose. So pick the one that you really like doing.
Yeah, I love that. That's really great. And I think like niche that I remember hearing someone talk about years ago, like a coach kind of person that you can't appeal to everybody because you really end up appealing to nobody, and that people think if I get too small of a niche, nobody's going to be able to find me. But once you get into, if you have just the right niche and you're focusing on that particular people, then you become the expert for those people, and then those people know the other people that are in their niche.
Yeah.
Well, I've run out of questions. Is there anything else that you would like us to know about you or about Drawing Booth or the work that you do or becoming a not starving artist that you haven't already mentioned?
I don't know, but I'm very accessible, so people can feel free to message me and find, and find us.
I'll put the ticker tape of all your different ways of getting onto, or all the ways for people to get up to. Creative says SEO for us too, followed by referrals. So that's his number one. And just in case there's somebody who doesn't know, SEO is search engine optimization. So actually, question for you about that.
Yep.
Who does your SEO? Who does that?
No one. We
like,
just
you guys do it. Like, how did you figure out what terms to use and all that stuff?
No, it's not about that. It's about when and we even rebranded our website. We were NY Drawing Booth, like New York Drawing Booth, and then we switched our URL to Drawing Booth. So we had to kind of redo all of our, just the coming up in the searches. Mm-hmm. But when you have a diverse number of people clicking on your website, and because we work with event planners, we'll work with the event planners from like really big name companies that we're like not allowed to mention because we just provide their service. But Google sort of, or like a search engine, picks up on the fact that there are these companies, like big deal web names, that are clicking on our link. So maybe some of it was just direct after a real trade show, but then it builds and builds so that you become like at the top of a search.
Right. Oh, okay. Good to know. Great.
Yeah. Also, your web designer, like if you're working with a web designer or whoever is helping you with your website, there are some things that they can do to just optimize it. But we don't put a special amount of energy in making sure our language, like you should make sure that your language is the language that they're looking for. But like we don't brand, like with our portraits, we don't put the word caricature because we don't like caricatures. Sometimes a hashtag caricature, hashtag not a caricature, just to clarify.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Elke. This was really wonderful to get to know you a little bit better and to hear more about Drawing Booth. And I'm going to keep drawing booth in the back of my mind because I know that somewhere, someday, somehow, this is going to come in handy for me and people that I know. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And I encourage you to leave comments, even if you're watching the recording, because we'll loop them back and get them back to Elke. And as a reminder, I just want to let you know we have some other known live programming coming up. So this coming Friday, the 17th, at 11 o'clock in the morning is our show Pivot Talk. And this episode is called Change from the Bottom Up, and it's how the nonprofit Connecticut Diaper Bank pivoted both their distribution and their donor engagement. Then this coming Tuesday, the 21st at 8:30 in the morning, Julia Googe, social media maven of Agents of Branding, runs Digital Media Sync. And it'll be the third in a series of 3 on virtual events. And this one in particular features a checklist for virtual event promotions. And then next Thursday on this show, Known Live, on the 23rd at 3 o'clock, we're going to feature Marina Marmolejo. She's the founder of Dream Kit, and that's an app that connects homeless youth with virtual resources, and they can receive rewards for their growth and share progress with the community. So again, thank you so much, Elke. I wish you all the best, and hopefully a lot more folks will know about the drawing booth now. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.